In a world of incredibly talented, creative individuals comes one man, a noob to content creation and Blender, with the hopes of creating his first ever YouTube video. Will it be good? Will it be worth watching? That's enough of that. At the beginning of the year, I set myself a challenge. Get serious about learning all I could in Blender, with the goal of creating my own animated content and characters. I would end the year with a summary video on all I'd managed to create, releasing it onto YouTube. This video. So how did I do? I had to formulate a plan of action, and I had a simple process: a small desk calendar with a tick for doing something in Blender that day, a black dot if not. Being deliberately vague on what I was doing in Blender was to foster that creative freedom to choose what direction I wanted to go in. So long as I was doing something in Blender, I got my tick for the day. And controversially, I didn't want to start with the Blender Donut tutorial. I wanted to create a character model, so I looked for a tutorial based on this, and Pixel 3D delivered, a brilliant channel with many great tutorials. Definitely check it out, links will be in the description below to all channels mentioned. And so I created my first 3D low poly model, and my journey had begun. I found the next tutorial by Blender Frenzy, creating a skull, immediately being drawn to this more realistic look. I soon had the finished model and really liked how it came out. I was getting closer to making my own things, but I got impatient and tried to make the entire skeleton, and well... yeah, it wasn't great. I tried to sculpt detail on top of a low poly base. This was not the way. I realised I was using knowledge from the low poly tutorial I did, instead of the more recent skull tutorial. Why? Because low poly was easier, and I fell into the trap of laziness. Never again. I went back, first creating the individual ribs out of basic extruded cubes. I made sure to use a mirror modifier to save time and keep the rib cage symmetrical. And it was time for the secret weapon, the subdivision surface modifier. This gave the ribs a much better look, closer to that realism I was looking for. Now I was ready to tackle this.
Round 2, fight!
I now had my second model created, this time taking what I had previously learned to add a body to the skull I had made, and I actually improved it recently. I was quickly getting used to the software, picking up all the tips and tricks along the way. The shortcuts in Blender are vast. Luckily the manual is easily accessible. Good luck memorizing them all. Repetition is key. To reinforce what I had learned and to get some of my creative ideas out, I decided to make some models using what I knew. I made original character designs like this shrimp, established simple characters like Shy Guy, and each time I tried to add new techniques, like with my rock golem's bumpy skin using the brush sculpt tools. I even made some, well, slightly sus models, if you know what I mean. But there was one model scarier than the rest, done without reference: my frog. My eyes! It's probably how medieval artists created their work. Anyway, moving swiftly on, I began searching for a bigger project that would bring animation into play. I tried many tutorials on YouTube up until this point, but the algorithm gods had a gift in store for me. They delivered me CG Boost. This glorious channel not only had great tutorials, but a website where they were offering paid courses, and the Blender Launchpad course was exactly what I was looking for. So it was bye-bye money, hello big project time. And I had one already in mind, Lethal Company, a very fun game with lots of cool things I could recreate, so I did. I decided to recreate the Lethal Company ship first, taking in-game reference shots. I like getting all the little details sorted, but now I needed a crew, faithful employees for the company, and so my next model came together. It was a simple process given what I had learned so far, but I needed to take the next step forward and learn how to rig this model, so it was back to the YouTube tutorial grind. Pixo 3D delivered once again exactly what I was looking for, but many other channels had great videos that I watched. Following the tutorial, I was able to set up a simple rig that had inverse kinematics for the limbs. I then set about recreating the interior of the ship, along with all the typical items you find inside. I found this to be very enjoyable as I was modelling what I could see in game and beginning to understand how they were made. I was piecing together a scene that I could use for the next animation, but I would make another noob mistake, animating by eye as I went along, and the results, well, they speak for themselves. This will definitely be something I revisit in the future to improve, but the scene came together and I was done with my first animated character sequence. Here is a sneak peek. I had successfully finished the Blender course at this point, applying all I had learned to produce models based on Lethal Company and some of my own designs. I played with shader nodes to get the cel-shade look of some of the monsters from the game, creating unique rigs for different shaped creatures and playing with texture paints for some of the models. I used a technique of stencil shading on details from the game models too, as the low poly style was easy to paint in this way. I was learning a great deal and I was having a lot of fun doing so. Applying these newfound skills to an original concept was my next goal, and I wanted to create an epic medieval fantasy style animation. I began creating the assets, ranging from weapons to cookware. Referencing actual medieval cooking stoves, I once again enjoyed bringing out the small details, like the chain link holding the cauldron and the ash collecting beneath. For the bedding, I included a cloth simulation to get the wrinkles looking realistic. And for the log cabin, I included an interior with a door that could be animated to swing open. The next asset I created required me to sculpt a horse, which for a person who cannot draw one, I was happy with the end result. This was fully rigged, a simple one like before, but with the harness I decided to use a new method, which was implementing bendy bones. The cart included the first time use of drivers, where the movement of one bone moves the connected bone, either rotating it or moving it entirely. This I used for the wheels to rotate them when the cart moves backwards and forwards, and to cause the cart to rock when turning, to add that nice touch of realism. I was opening Blender every day, learning so much and developing a good routine, dedicating most of my time to making things and earning those ticks on my calendar. Whole scenes were coming together nicely, playing with the lighting, textures, and background images to generate my fantasy settings. I was beginning to lay the groundwork for my next big Blender project, realising some of my own designs and bringing them to life. But I was about to hit a wall. My character models were stylised but not realistic looking. I mean, this was the closest I could get at this point, resembling Aardman claymation.
Bruh.
Those chickens are up to something.
Quiet.
I wanted something like this. CG Cookie had a great video on making the character from scratch, and it was miles away from what I currently had. Aside from the sculpt, it was the skin texture that really brings it to life and separates it from stylised work. Researching, I found Ducky3D's video on reptile skin and Kenny Art's tutorial on skin textures, and I was ready to apply these. The reptile scales in particular was interesting, as I had a fantasy creature that I had modelled based on the Welsh-Irish folklore creature Boggles. And the finished result looked really good, especially up close. In doing this creature, I also had come across a tutorial for eyes by Pixelme that, and combining this with the scales gave a nice end result. It was getting time to redeem my earlier horror frog, and I had a plan, references, and a worthy muse. The grumpy desert rain frog. I sketched out a basic storyboard for a short animation and set about modelling this little guy. It was an easy process, the body and limbs being essentially stretched out blobs. Combining the techniques from the tutorials I had watched, I was able to produce a nice detailed model very quickly. I was also getting used to the basic workflow of creating rigs, and was playing with adding more bones to the mouth, eyes and eyelids, giving me more control in the later animation stage. The skin texture nodes were working nicely too, using reference for the pattern of the frog to aid in vertex painting the final colours to the model. Now my model was rigged and ready, I now needed to create his desert environment.
Ta-da!
It was back to YouTube once more. Luckily, I didn't have to search long before Bro3D came to the rescue, with a very easy to follow and great tutorial on setting up a desert floor scene. Incorporating familiar node setups, I quickly was able to produce a variety of landscapes for my desert rain frog. The desert landscape materials came from Ambient CG's website, and the backgrounds from HDRI Haven. Next step was to improve the animation process. Here, familiar channels came forward with walk cycles and path following tutorials, and now I was ready. I spent the next few weeks animating, rendering out short chunks of the project to make sure the timing looked good. Often it didn't and required multiple steps to flow smoothly. The use of the non-linear animation tab helped stack these repeated movements and short variations. I kept up this process until I had an end animation that I was somewhat happy with, and this brings us to the latest Blender project I have created. Enjoy!
Hey, that's pretty good.
So, this is where I currently am in my Blender journey. The perfectionist in me wanted to keep working on this frog animation, and I'm by no means done with this little guy's adventures, but I am craving bringing to life a new concept, a new project, and I have plenty of ideas scribbled down. I think going forward on this channel I'll be creating shorter videos, releasing them as and when I finish a project in Blender. I've learned a lot in this first year and established a solid habit. I genuinely look forward to making new things. It was my first time editing a video, first time using DaVinci Resolve to do this, first year using Blender properly, first YouTube video on my first YouTube channel. A lot of firsts. So thank you for sticking around and watching this long video of my journey. I hope to see you in the next one, and have a great creative day.